So, hi everybody. We can get started. I see we already have a lot of participants online. So, welcome everybody to this online side event on addressing the income, child labor, gender nexus in global value chains. My name is Maggie de Jong. I work as an advisor for the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, also known as RVO, and I am your co-host today. I hope you can all hear me fine. If there are any technical issues, please mention them in the chat. We're very happy to be here today as part of the 6th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labor. And thank you so much for joining us. I saw some of you already joined earlier. I know that when I was traveling to the UK and I went into a different time zone, sometimes this comes or reflects differently in your agenda. So maybe that happened to some of the early participants as well. So thank you very much for your patience. Bienvenue tout le monde. I also saw some francophone names, so very happy you could join us. There is French translation available, so please find instructions in the chat. Please also note that this session will be recorded. So I'll start with sharing the agenda of today. So after my introduction, I will hand over to Selma van der Haar. She is Advisor Development Economics and Impact Evaluation from the KIT Royal Tropical Institute. And she's also the main author of the study that we will be presenting today. So after my introduction, Selma will present to you the main findings of this study. And then we will continue with a panel discussion. And today we have with us Delight Tendeku. He is a livelihoods development expert with the company ETG and the Beyond Beans Foundation. Also with us is Minoru Ogasawaru. He is Chief Technical Advisor from ILO Axel Africa. And Emmanuel Bukomeko manages impact programs in East and Southern Africa for the Rainforest Alliance. So we're excited to have a panel of speakers that represent different actors in global supply chains, all working to eliminate child labor. So after the panel discussion, we will open the floor for questions from the audience. You can already write them in the chat. Please also mention the organization you work for and to who you would like to ask the question. And then we will end with closing remarks from Charlotte Bernhard. She is Senior Policy Advisor from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, and she's already in Morocco as she will be attending the conference there. So just for an introduction, within RVO, I am an advisor for the subsidy program for responsible business and the fund against child labor. These are instruments of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs to assist companies and their partners to address the following 4 themes that you see here on the slide. This includes child labor, and it helps companies and their partners to tackle social sustainability issues in their international value chains. Actually, the call for proposals just opened yesterday, as you can see here. Apart from the subsidy for projects, we also have a knowledge and learning agenda where we aim to unlock the lessons learned from over 150 projects. So companies do not need to reinvent the wheel. And there's so much knowledge on the field that we would like to unlock that today through publications and through linking and learning. This is also why we commissioned the study that we will be discussing today. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Selma for her presentation of this study. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. I missed the next slide. There we go. Yes. So my name is Selma van der Haar. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. And I'm part of the Impact Economics team of KIT. We are based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And with this team, we work a lot with the private sector on their responsible business conduct policies, especially evaluating the impact of their programs and finding a way of how to strengthen those programs. And we do a lot of work on income, but also on child labor. And often the assumption is made that income and productivity interventions automatically decrease the risks of child labor. However, in 2023, we performed a study in Côte d'Ivoire amongst cocoa farmers, and we actually found that child labor prevalence was the highest amongst households that reached the living income. So a decent income for like a decent standard of living. And so this was very surprising for us, and also a reason to further unpack this relationship to see how income and child labor are related, and how, as you see in the title, child labor risks and living income gaps can be addressed in an integrated manner in global value chain. Here you see the names of the team. And the main objective, or the ultimate objective, is also to provide, to not only understand this relationship, but also to provide practical guidance to companies and other organizations who are implementing programs, policies on how to reduce child labor and close living income gaps at the same time. So first objective was to unpack this relationship. And you see here on the right that we did not only look at income and child labor, but also integrated a gender lens there, because how gender is cross-cutting in both domains actually. So it influences how work is divided within a household between men and women, boys and girls. And also income dynamics are highly gendered. So we really focus on this nexus, that little yellow leaf that you see there, where everything comes together and where they all interact. And we draw upon real-world examples from the cocoa, coffee, and cashew sector to identify high potential approaches to really address that nexus in an effective way. And we focus on these crops because they are some of the main commodities, global commodities produced in Africa. And they are often produced in the context of small farms. So smallholding farms, family farms, that are also known for being the place where a lot of the child labor is happening, children helping on their family farm. And especially from the cocoa sector and the coffee sector, there's already been a lot of attention on these problems for a long time. So there's also a lot of interventions to learn from, also for other sectors. And as Maggie already said, our project was funded by the SPVO fund, and we had a very strong advisory committee. So the approach. So we used, first of all, we did a literature review to really unpack this relationship, not only looking at literature or examples from the cocoa, coffee, and cashew sector, but much broader. And then we identified and mapped existing projects. So we did not do our own primary data collection, but we used existing evidence that are out there, collated that, and analyze it in order to draw conclusions on how to design interventions. So based on project documents and literature, and we had 4 case studies that we dived in deeper into, and 2 of them will also be presented today. The ETG Beyond Beans VSLA Child program that was implemented around amongst cocoa farmers in West Africa, and the Rainforest Alliance West Nile Child Labor Free Zone in Uganda with coffee farmers. So based on this literature review, we identified 4 main mechanisms that mediate this relationship on the nexus, as you can see here on the right. First of all, income level. Child labor is more prevalent in poorer households, but this relationship between income and child labor is not linear. So while child labor is also prevalent amongst higher income families, and incomes must rise beyond a certain threshold before child labor begins to fall. And lastly, also in factors that raise income, so for instance, higher crop prices or favorable weather conditions, can also increase the demand for child labor, the use of child labor. So another factor is actually beyond the level of the income is also the stability of the income. Child labor is a major coping mechanisms against income shocks. So it can be shocks from price volatility, weather shocks, or family members falling ill. So and especially in the sectors that we are looking at, the incomes are very volatile. Then, and not only volatile, but there's also a very high labor demand to produce these crops. So it's it involves heavy manual labor, especially to produce cocoa, coffee, and cashew. And furthermore, there are very few other opportunities in many of these communities to earn a living. So there's a very high labor burden on households, very low returns on labor, but also in terms of intra-household distribution of labor, also influence the relationship and the effect on child labor. Lastly, social norms and cultural meaning. These norms around gender, childhood, what it involves to be part of a family, they also influence how work in the household is distributed. So from a young age, boys are often engaged in farm work and market activities, while girls are much more likely to be involved in household income or household chores and caregiving activities. So these so both for children and also for the parents, these type of norms affect the distribution. So that was the theory in a nutshell. And then looking into different approaches to address this nexus in a way, we selected 5 approaches. And if I say approach, it's often a combination of multiple interventions. And these approaches are relevant for cocoa, coffee, and cashew sector. And we selected them also based on the amount of information that was available. And them taking a different entry point to the nexus. So to look from different angles, as you can see here on the right. First of all, we looked at cash transfers. So those are direct payments. They can be either conditional upon certain requirements, such as, for instance, sending your child to school or adopting specific agronomic practices, such as agroforestry, and or unconditional. Secondly, we have informal saving groups, such as VSLAs, where we will hear more about later in the panel discussion as well. So these are groups of people, often women, but not only, that come together on a weekly basis and save together, take out loans, and also support each other. Third, household approaches. So these are traditionally a gender approach, there where such as the GALS, Gender Action Learning System, for instance, one example of them, where spouses are facilitated to make plans for their family and households and to discuss like the distribution of work, the investments that they want to do as a family, etc., in order with the objective to have a fairer distribution of work within the households. Then fourth, we looked at professional labor services, so professional groups that of laborers that take over certain farm activities. And lastly, child labor-free zones, also one of the case studies that we looked into. Those start more from a community level, from a geographic area, a zone, where all relevant stakeholders are involved to set up the organizational structures and institutions to together combat child labor. So, for instance, you're often involved setting up child labor committees that provide information about hazardous work and that monitor instances of child labor and provide remediation, but also strengthening of educational quality to provide alternatives to child labor. And we gathered evidence on the effects of these approaches on the nexus. And there's, in general, very little public evidence available on the direct effects on child labor. So we mapped the underlying effects on of the effects on the underlying mechanisms. Here you see a summary table. I will not go into detail in all of the boxes, but it's kind of a summary, a qualitative assessment based on the size of the effect. So that's the color. So the darker the color, the higher the size that we found, higher the effect, and the strength of the evidence. So the more pluses, the stronger the evidence. And what we can conclude from this is, first of all, that no single approach addresses all of the aspects of the nexus. Most of the approaches deliver some income gains, but these are usually modest. So even cash transfers have the strongest impact there, but often they are not high enough to clearly reach a living income. If we look at economic resilience, then there is stronger evidence here of multiple interventions. For instance, cash transfers and saving groups all help families cope with shocks and help them to cover also the educational and health expenditures of their children. So there's quite some evidence there. On household labor, the evidence is actually least available. So both on the household labor burden as well as the intra-household labor distribution, there's a large knowledge gap. So while professional labor services, as you can see in the middle, show strong potential of decreasing the total labor burden, there is to date still very little evidence about them. And lastly, if we look at intra-household labor distribution, household approaches, there's quite strong evidence from household approaches. So there's there's potential there. And the last dimension, norms and values. They are, of course, more difficult also to influence because they're often very deeply ingrained in society. Household approaches have been found quite effective in addressing gender norms. That's also why they were developed. And also in child labor free zones, norm change is also at the heart of the approach. And there's some indication that that also works, but the evidence is still quite limited. So in general, there's a lot to learn there still. So to conclude, it's all in a nutshell, so there's much more to read in our reports. But one of the main conclusions that we see is that comprehensive approaches are needed to address all of these dimensions, and especially also to there also the careful design and combination of ventures is therefore key to address these risks and trade-offs of individual interventions. So for instance, the combinations, so we only looked at 5 interventions, but there's of course a lot of other aspects that can be taken into account, such as strengthening educational quality, or subsidizing health expenditures, especially school fees or health fees, which take a lot of the take up a lot of the income of people. And especially for vulnerable households, extra care and extra interventions are also needed. Then looking at a lot of the projects that we saw are quite small scale still. So a lot is happening and a lot of learning is happening, but in order to really address child labor at scale, we need strong collaboration and coordination, and also sharing of findings and collective learning, like what we are doing today, is very important. I forgot one thing in the design. It's very important also to take these labor effects, that is still such a huge black box, and also gender dynamics into account. You can read a summary of all of our findings in this policy brief that we developed specifically also as guidance for companies and other organizations implementing interventions. And with that, I would like to finalize my presentation and move us to the panel discussion. As Maggie already said at the beginning of the session, please save your questions for the end, or at least you can put them in the chat, but in the end we will address them at the Q&A. So for the panel discussion, I first would like to invite Delight Tendeko from ETG Beyond Beans to start and give a short introduction to the project that he's presenting.
Thank you very much, Selma, for the detailed presentation. My name is Delight Tendeko, and I work for Beyond Beans, based in Ghana, which is one of the origins where Beyond Beans implement sustainability activities across 7 origins. And as part of our sustainability activities, we implement programs that address child labor in several ways. I would like to just highlight 3 of them, and then later on I throw a spotlight on one of them. The first is our child labor monitoring and remediation system that helps us to identify children who are in child labor or at risk of child labor, and then provide ongoing assistance and guidance to them to be able to take them out of those situations. The next one is our Village Savings and Loans Association Plus, which we call VSLA Plus for short, and also the income generating activities we implement across our VSLAs. Some of the targeted remediation interventions as a result of our work across the communities include the provision of professional labor services that helps to provide professional labor services for agricultural activities within the communities. We also do construction or renovation of school infrastructure, as well as wash infrastructure to improve education delivery and provision in the communities that we implement our sustainability programs. For kids who are unable to get back into the formal education system, we provide opportunity for them by enrolling them in training and apprenticeship programs to help them to be productive in their outcomes and resources. And as well, there are always areas that you see we don't have kids who have education facilities within the community, and they will have to walk very long distances. As well, we have education programs that helps them to carry them to and from their education facility to their communities, just by way of closing the access gap for those kids. So I would like to throw more light on our VSLA Plus methodology. And the VSLA Plus methodology is a community-driven approach that tries to address the underlying causes of child labor. And so we already know that the VSLAs, the classic VSLAs are a group of people, normally 30, that come together to build capital or contribute, and also provide that kind of social cohesion and support for each other in the community. But what we have done is to develop methodologies that leverage on this platform to be able to address the issues of child labor and economic resilience within the communities. So the entry point of this for us is the setup of the VSLAs, because then that provides us the basis to be able to implement 4 key activities with the VSLAs. So the first one is, after the setup of the VSLAs, we implement what we call the child methodology. The child is an abbreviation which stands for Child Household Intervention and Learning for Development. And in this, we provide 2 key trainings for our members in the VSLAs within the community. The first one is the child, where we sensitize the members on the adverse effect of child labor, as well as provide that participatory approach for them to be able to identify child labor and then remediate it within the community level. And so it provides the opportunity for these members and the community members to own the process and to be able to make it sustainable in a very long run. The second leg of the training is what we call the GALS, Gender Action Learning System. And the GALS sensitize the members on gender issues, gender mainstreaming, how they're able to share resources, how they're able to allocate resources and labor within the communities. With these 2 learnings, we have evidences that have shown us that children have been enrolled back into school, which means that the number of missing days in school have reduced drastically. And also for children who are also exposed to hazardous activities like holding catalysis and chemicals, that has reduced significantly because households are able to understand the concept more and be able to find a local remedy for them. And also we have household also reporting of improved relationship with their members, especially their spouses. Again, how resources are shared and also how they are able to share labor within the household has also improved significantly. The second activity we implement with our VSLAs is digitalization. If for those of us who are very familiar with the VSLA activities, 100% of the activities are manual. The bookkeeping, the contribution of the money, and how they manage their money. These are essentially their manual processes. And once the VSLA grows and capital grows and management of this VSLA grows, then this becomes complicated and takes a lot of time. And so we have digitized the VSLAs where we do not alter the activities and then the culture of the VSLAs in any way, but only digitize the processes. And that helps them to save time and also cure the time poverty issue. We know that women are burdened with a lot of time, with a lot of activities within the household. And so digitizing these activities helps to save time in their activities and in the management of their facilities. And this brings the issue of efficiency and transparency within the VSLA operations. We have evidences that show that we have saved time across the VSLA activities by 70%, which is great because then they are able to save time to be able to invest it in other productive areas. The next thing is the training of our VSLAs and the household members on income generating activities. For this, we focus on strengthening the existing businesses or the existing activities of the household, not necessarily helping them to embark into new ones, because evidence has shown us also that if households enter into new income generating activities, then there's competition of labor. And so we try to strengthen the existing services by giving them training on numeracy, on financial literacy, and also how they are able to develop their businesses so that they are able to upscale and also able to improve or increase their earnings from the same businesses or the same income generating activities that they find themselves in. And for VSLAs that have matured over time, which we monitor, and when evidence shows that when the VSLAs continue to grow up to a limit, then the requirements of credit or loans increases beyond the credit capacity of the VSLAs. And then there is this gap between reaching those credit gaps and then how they're able to finance themselves. And so for VSLAs that have been mature, then we link them into financial institutions. Remember, we've already provided a digitization foundation. And so they already have their credit worthiness, they already have their processes, enables them to be able to link into financial institutions, to be able to have access to greater credit. And so for us, within the framework of child labor and how we improve resilience of households, these are the approaches that we engage with our VSLA called the VSLA Plus methodology. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Delight. Then I hand over to Minoru Agasaware from the ILO.
Hi, thanks, Selma. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So yeah, very pleased to be part of this wonderful webinar. So yes, I like to present ILO Axel Africa project system building approach. So the Axel Africa project is basically a project aiming at the elimination of child labor in supply chains in Africa. The project is being funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. So that's also another reason why we are working very closely with RVO and RVO partners. So very glad to be here with you. And basically the project covers supply chains such as cocoa, cotton, coffee, tea, and gold mining. Then we are looking at 6 countries in Africa, namely Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Kenya, and Mali, Nigeria, Uganda. So 6 countries. Very importantly, ILO as a tripartite agency, like governments, employers, organization, and workers' organizations, those are the constituents of the ILO. So we are always taking kind of system building approach, mainly institutionalize what the ILO supports through the project. And then also because of this supply chain angle, really trying to engage private sector by promoting, PPP arrangements. This is also to fill the kind of funding gap of like public resources to really strengthen the efforts for the elimination of child labor by bringing different like stakeholders and also different like financial human resources to accelerate our action for the elimination of child labor. And we are taking very strong kind of stance, working with cooperatives, but also BSLAs. I think Delight already mentioned quite a lot about BSLA. So we are working through those cooperatives or BSLA kind of structure by bringing different interventions such as livelihood, financial inclusion, and also like a bit of innovative approach such as promoting like use of biochar. I will maybe a little bit explain deeper on those interventions with the next slide. Then also as ILO added value, we are taking a very strong occupational safety and health approach by introducing this work improvement for neighborhood development tool. This is the ILO tool to promote, occupational safety and health within the kind of workers at lower tiers of supply chains. Yes, next slide, please. So what I like to proudly share today is, a little bit how the Axel Africa project, the ILO, is working in Cote d'Ivoire to promote, universal health coverage among cocoa farmers. So Cote d'Ivoire government has been promoting this universal health coverage for all people in Cote d'Ivoire, but still there's a lot of challenges to, cover all people, especially people working in the informal economy. So, what we tried is working with government institution because we are really taking the system building approach for sustainability. So government agency to promote, that health, universal health coverage. And then also, of course, working with cooperatives to reach out informal economy workers, in this case, cocoa farmers. So together with, of cooperatives and the health insurance agency, ILO supported a very strong enrollment campaign for the health insurance system, and then try to really enroll, cocoa farmers. But then in addition to that, ILO tried to promote a PPP approach by approaching some of private sector companies to contribute insurance fees of those farmers to cover, their kind of insurance fees. So this is really very much appreciated by cocoa farmers, cooperative members, and then also kind of facilitated a policy dialogue to what extent, like a structure like a Conseil Café Cacao, a public structure is able to, cover insurance fees for farmers. So I'm really happy to kind of report that, thanks to this kind of collaborative efforts, Conseil Café Cacao decided to keep covering insurance fees of all cocoa farmers who are registered in Côte d'Ivoire. So this is a really example of how a project like Accel can influence, kind of policy decision making to really address one of the root causes of child labor, which is the health risk. Because it's obviously, if cocoa farmers get sick, one of the solutions is really use their children for work, but also the impact of being sick economically is very important because they lose maybe, workforces for a couple of days, and also health expenses will be very important. So that's going to have an obvious impact on incomes. So maybe to finish, so we still have a different approach other than health insurance kind of interventions. Like I mentioned, WIND approach is really promoting occupational safety and health among workers at lower tier. This is kind of facilitating farmers themselves to look at working hazards and improve their working conditions. So you see before wind, after wind, there was a lady cutting a cocoa pod with a machete, but some groups managed to improve much easier way of breaking cocoa pods so that they can reduce working hazards and really protecting workers and also improving the productivity as well. And then also there's another example of BSLA who managed to really run early childhood care facility. So this is another way of really letting ladies, to be a little bit free from the childhood, children care, and then, able to have some economic activities or something else. So this is another great example of working with groups such as BSLA to address some of the root causes of child labor. And then the final example is, this is just working with cocoa farmers, of course, in partnership with agriculture extension officers, promoting the production of biochar using cocoa pods. So this is a very innovative way of improving productivity by use of, biochar, but also addressing at the same time a CO2 emission and accessing to carbon credit. So there's an additional way of, providing an income to
Thank you very
farmers.
much, Manoru.
Yeah, I think I've stopped
Just
here.
gonna,
Thank you so much, Salma. Yeah, okay.
With an eye on the time, I would like to move on
sure.
to Emmanuel. Thank you very much. We will surely dive deeper into your very interesting examples. But first, we move to Emmanuel. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Salma. My name is Emmanuel Bukomeko, and I work with the Rainforest Alliance, and I'm based in Uganda. The Rainforest Alliance has been working in Uganda for some time now, and it has had projects around education and more so the eradication of child labor in the communities. And it all started in around 2015 in the West Nile region of Uganda, in a very remote coffee farming community where child labor issues were prevalent. So Rainforest Alliance came in with so many other stakeholders, including a coffee company, that's Chagalanyi Coffee Limited, NGOs, the local ones. We had international NGOs on board. We had a teachers union, a local one, and also an international teachers union. We had the local government. We had the Uganda police, then the community structures, and the cultural leaders. All of them came together and had a project which was funded by HIVOS, and we called it the Child Labor Free Zone Project in that area. It's basically a geographical region that's cut off, and activities have to be done to ensure that there's no child labor within that specific geographic location that has been earmarked for the project. And we had different approaches that were used in this child labor free zone. And one of them was the Gender for Growth, where we used the girls' methodology, the gender action learning systems, to ensure that the gender disparities, women, wives and husbands and children all are together. And we know that when they all work together, then the households adopt better practices, and then in the livelihoods would eventually improve. So this focused so much on working together and then improving gender relations at the household level. The other approach involved, as my former panelists have talked about, the VSLAs. We had also the VSLAs to provide a quick access to low-cost loans and also some form of saving. Remember, this is a coffee community, and so money comes in seasonally. When there's a coffee season, they have a lot of money. When there's no season, there's no money, and access to financial institutions like banks is really hard. So the savings or the VSL is acted as a source of finance, personal finance for development, and to enable pay school fees in the periods more so outside the coffee seasons. And to be a member, you also had to have all your children back to school. So that was a strategy that we employed to ensure that more children are sent to school. And within this object, VSLS, we also had an education fund. This was basically to support the disadvantaged but very bright students to stay in school. For example, orphaned or children that are leading households, So those ones that you see, you can do nothing apart from giving. For example, it would be a cash out and say, yeah, you have this amount of money and then go back to school. Otherwise, we can do nothing for you. We also had the Fundi or youth teams. These teams were made out, they were composed of professional youths who were trained in implementing the good agronomic practices for the farmers. So remember, previously, more children would stay at home to take care of the fields, to weed, to stamp, to pick coffee, to spray chemicals, etc. But so you would take a the head of the household that can you let your child go? And then the answer would be yes, but who is going to do what this child has been doing? So there was be a gap, and this gap was filled up by the Fundi teams. And good enough, at the time, Chagalanyi Coffee Limited came in and subsidized for these activities. So part of the money would be paid by the household and part by Chagalanyi Coffee Limited. It also gave them the tools that are needed to with the work, for example, chainsaws when it comes to stamping, and then other motorized equipment to speed up their work. We also went ahead and had coffee demonstration plots, and these were a training ground for increased coffee productivity. Remember, we are looking at household livelihoods, and we want to improve the amount of money coming and get these people out of poverty. And one way is through coffee, increasing its production and productivity. So this worked so well. But above all that, also the environment where these children would be, the school environment after leaving home. At first, it was harsh. Children used to be caned, given corporal punishments, no food, no scholastic materials, and what have you. So we had school level activities at that. And we had a formation of a number of children's clubs. We introduced, for example, the sports clubs, drama clubs, the agriculture clubs, debating, which made school more interesting. And in addition, we also had the remedial teaching aspect where we could help the slow learners, all those children that had been out of school for so long, to also get to catch up with the others. And in the end, we saw performance increasing. We saw the education, like the enrollment in schools increased. The child labor aspect dropped from over 10% to less than 2% in this region at the time when we worked, and so many others. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. So then we dig a bit deeper into all of your very interesting projects, and let's dive right in with the first question. So in our research, we saw that the relationship between income, child labor, and gender is very complex, and also that no single intervention can address all of these dimensions, right? And especially that they also come with inherent risks and trade-offs. I didn't go very deep into the risks, but one of course is increasing labor burdens that you also mentioned, but also resistance against changes around norms or gender backlash from GELS type of household interventions. So careful design is very important there to address these. So I'd like to start with Delight. Which of these risks have you encountered in your program, and how have you been able to address them?
I think one of the risks we have encountered, or kind of the trade-offs we have seen in terms of implementation, is again what we have done on enroute in IVC, where we have seen that also women who are into IGAs are likely to have competing labor demands, and that means that then children within the household are able to will have to fill into the gap. And also some of these labor risks have been intensified in those areas. And so how we try to encounter to be able to mitigate those is to learn on the doings, where we now understand that we don't necessarily have to let people go into new IGAs, but also we already have existing IGAs of this household. Women are already doing a lot of things before even the VSLAs. It is important to identify which ones are the most potential or for upscaling, and then identify pathways to strengthening them to be able to embark on those activities. And so you can see us no more trying to promote necessarily new IGAs for households, but trying to strengthen them to be able to upscale on those. Major interventions will be trying to train them on numeracy skills, on financial skills, because then they are able to access credit and able to use the credit into their businesses as they want. So one key thing, not necessarily helping households to identify new IGAs, but let them identify the potential ones that they're already doing, and then we help them to upskill on those. Thank you.
All right, very clear. Thank you very much. And Emmanuel, how did these risks come up in the context of coffee farmers in Uganda?
Thank you so much, Salma. Salma. We encountered exactly the risks as highlighted by the KIT. First, the income interventions alone will see increased pressure, labor pressure on households, and risked shifting work to the children, and these would most often be girls. Secondly, the child labor awareness without income support, created resistance. And because families faced higher school costs and loss of the labor, the people who had been working at the household farms. So our key learning came from the randomized controlled trial, where we had to put 3 intensities of activities. We had the medium intensity, the high intensity, and the low intensity, the high, the medium, and low, and the region. So we had geographical areas where we had the high intensity activities, medium, and low. And it showed that norm change only occurred in the high intensity areas where we had so many activities, where we had interventions like community monitoring, child labor committees, school-based activities, and remediations. And we are combined with the other income interventions that compensated for school fees and lost household labor. So where interventions were implemented in isolation, like in the low intensity regions, households could afford compliance and social, where we had all these in the high, where we had all these interventions. So the households could afford compliance, and then we realized that eventually the social norms shifted. Remember, at times it's a kind of ideology or social norms at play. So the lessons here is clear that addressing the income, gender, child labor nexus requires bundled, high-intensity interventions that reduce labor demands, like in the case where we had the funding teams, offset economic trade-offs, and reinforce new social norms simultaneously. Thank you very much.
All right, very clear. Thank you. I am thinking, let's move to the next question, so we have a bit more time for the last question, which is bigger. So as I also presented, gender is cross-cutting, both poverty and child labor. And often some of the unintended negative consequences they disproportionately affect women and girls. And also looking from a responsible business conduct perspective, so also for companies, the work that is done by girls is often overlooked because it takes place within the household and not on the farm. Miro, I would like to start with you with this question. How can these gender aspects be addressed, and what have you learned about this in the ILO Excel program?
Yeah, thank you so much, Selma, for this very important question. I think we are at the ILO and Accel Africa project, we take this question of gender dimension quite seriously. And indeed, when we promote livelihood intervention, yeah, I mean, for men and women, but I think for most of the case, women, are already busy, as you rightly said, with household kind of chores, for home kind of domestic activities. So it's often the case, it's a kind of additional kind of, work for women. And of course, sometimes women already, take this burden, but yeah, it's not necessarily easy to take it. But even if they can take, often the case, for example, taking care of younger children, often the case, somebody like older, like sister, of the family have to take care of younger children. So they ended up, those older sisters taking more time for household chore activities, and might be becoming very difficult to continue like educational activities and so forth. So I think that's really, very serious consideration we are taking. And then I think the example I presented earlier, like BSLA group managed to kind of run that early, childhood care facility. I think this is one of the kind of response to that problem, so that, women can still engage in some economic activities, like for income generation, but then still their place, as a group to leave, younger children to be taken care, rather than asking, older siblings to take care of, their younger siblings.
Yes.
So I think that's how
Clear.
we are addressing some of those
Okay.
challenges. Thank you.
And I was wondering also, especially with childcare, very often there's also a lack of money to afford childcare, not only lack of access, but also. So how do you address that, and how feasible is it to scale this broader?
Yeah, I think this is really very interesting, a kind of good practice we observed, with one BSLA in Uganda. So as we really strengthen the capacity of really BSLA groups, they really managed by themselves to develop such a model. So I think by strengthening the organization, structure of BSLA itself, and then encouraging to replicate such a model, I believe that, and also working with the local governments, we're trying to kind of promote and replicate such a model, not only within that community, but also beyond the community, and even like replicating this model in other countries other than Uganda.
And are these local governments open to that?
Yes,
we
yes,
need
I
to
think they
also
quite
co-invest?
appreciated these efforts, and then we are looking at how we can strengthen, replicate this model.
All right, thank you very much. And also part of like addressing all types of child labor and not just on the farm is also really one of the core advantages of child labor free zones. That's why I would like to ask Emmanuel how especially the more invisible labor of girls is addressed within the West Nile story.
Thank you. I think I agree with the findings of the research that gender cuts across poverty and child labor, and that girls are disproportionately affected, especially through the invisible domestic and care work that sits outside the farms and supply chain audits. In the child labor free zones approach, we designed precisely to address all forms of child labor, not only farm-based work. In the West now, this means that in addition to focusing on production sites, we also included a focus to the households and community level, where girls' labor is most visible. We undertook 3 additional efforts. 1, we had community managed child labor structures. This monitored every household, not just the farms, explicitly tracking domestic work, care duties, and family businesses where girls are overrepresented. The other effort was the gender transformative approach, the one I talked about, the girls' methodology. This helped the households to renegotiate the roles, redistribute the unpaid care work For example, both boys and girls can look after a child, can wash utensils, etc. And prioritize girls' education equally, not just to say now girls can go to school and then the boys are neglected. No, it had to be equally. And then third, at school level, we address the gender-specific barriers to retention, including we had the health clubs, we had remedial support, I talked about this, and then the attention to sanitation and dignity issues that affected so many of the adolescent girls that were attending schools. For example, we trained the young adolescents in making their own reusable sanitary towels, and we saw this help so much. What I would say is that when we address the gender and invisible child labor, addressing the invisible child labor requires going beyond the specific supply chain. For example, in this case, coffee. And I would say that only community-wide norm-changing approaches like the child labor-free zones can make girls' work visible. Challenging harmful social norms and deliver lasting reductions in child labor. That's what we have to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to ask something about that, especially around changing norms. Also, that can often, of course, also lead to resistance by communities. It's quite an intensive approach, especially when you're also going to look at how is labor distributed in households, etc. It gets into the private sphere of families. Did you encounter any backlash or any resistance, and how do you address that?
Yes, you are right. At first, we had some resistance. For example, in the West now, it's normally the girls that would carry heavy loads, would be involved in marketing agricultural produce. But in the design of our project, like I told you, we also had to bring the cultural leaders or the traditional leadership, the kingdom, the Alo kingdom on board. So these are the custodians of the traditional beliefs, the norms, and what have you. So once they appreciated what we are doing and we showed them the shortfalls of some of these cultural beliefs, then it was very easy for us to change the entire communities. If the chief came out and said, you know what, even boys can support, even a boy can wash utensils, even a boy can look after a feral kid, then everyone said, okay, if a chief says so, then let it be. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So that's also very key in the approach to get all the traditional leaders on board as well.
Right.
Very nice. Then let's move to the last question. So we have a bit of time for that. So while child labor mitigation has become a prominent part of responsible business conduct, very often what we saw is that projects stay at kind of pilot scale. We see a lot of learning happening, people trying different things, also supported with by RVO. But to really get into to address child labor at scale needs further alignment of efforts from value chain actors and governments and other actors. So, for instance, some of the factors that we identified were long-term commitments, which is very important also in the child labor-free zone, of course, but also strong partnerships and openness to share results and learning from each other's mistakes in order to move forward. I'd like to start with Delight. In your view, what is needed to scale efforts and what role are you playing? And especially because you are both representing a company, but also a implementing agency, right? So also the implementing a lot of programs for other companies. And what would you think also what governments and other companies perhaps can do more or change just in general? What advice do you have?
Yes, I think I would start from where you ended. continuous learning and trying not to reinvent the wheel, I think, is the first most important thing. For us in Beyond Beans, our program design is evidence-based, and then we leverage on continuous learning, how we have been able to evolve on our program over the past years, and how we are able to transfer knowledge across the programs and demonstrating to the partners and the government agencies that we do not always have to reinvent the wheel, but we continue to learn from existing programs that we do have. Example is the VSLA Plus methodology that we have shared on this platform. And we know that if we look at the evolution, we did not start from just the VSLA Plus, but we started from the classical VSLAs and move stepwise into the programs, demonstrating how important this is to government agencies and organizations is very important because that it improves efficiency. We are not able to continue to make the same mistakes over time. I think a specific example is what we have in the Nestle Income Accelerator program. And so for that program, we already have classical VSLAs that were already existing before the program came. But as part of the program, it was important that they also participate in the VSLA Plus methodology. We do not have to collapse or actually establish new VSLAs and have to create more time burden for these women to participate in two VSLAs. That does not make time and does not make a good case for efficiency. And so what we do is to reorient and integrate these old VSLAs into the new model. And then we just train them on the Gauss and the Charles methodology, and they are also able to continue with their VSLA activities. I think the second thing is context. Context is quite important because different contexts provide different methodologies to approach these kind of interventions. In Ghana, for example, you know that the enabling environment in terms of digitization is very advanced for us as compared to that of IVC. And so if we have critical investments by, for example, Nestle under the Income Accelerator program, how we ensure that we transfer this money onto the farmers is quite different as compared to how that process works in IVC. And therefore, for each of the programs and each of the relations, context is very important. And then how we are able to leverage on the enabling environment to be able to deliver these programs are important. Again, we also have to find ways. I think this is like a burden or a responsibility on the implementers to be able to find ways to be able to demonstrate measurable outcomes and how there are linkages across the programs. The issue of child labor is a very complex one, and how to be able to demonstrate impact across all the indicators, i.e. on income, on child labor, and all the other factors are quite important. So I think for us, being able to demonstrate measurable outcome and explain contextually how these outcomes affect other forms of parameters that are measured in the project are quite important. So for me, those are my ideas and based on our experience and practice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I was wondering, so you kind of sell your program to companies to implement for them, right? And how do you? So you already said something on how to make the case. How open are they to do these more comprehensive approaches that we are talking about? Because of course, for less is always better, but more is always better, but more is also more costly. So how do you? How open are they to that?
Yes, companies are open because based on the information you are able to provide them is what helps them to make a better decision, and how they are able to understand the concepts and also the methodologies that you want to implement, and to what extent it affects cost and to the long-term sustainability is also quite important. And so for us, trying to achieve the three things of measurable outcomes, a credible impact, and also as a long-term but not a short-term measure is quite important. And once you are able to engage those organizations on those levels, they are able to make informed decisions which also align with their sustainability goals.
All right, thank you very much. Then I move to Minoru. because we also see that a lot of companies are setting up their own child labor programs, but they are often not very well aligned with what governments are doing. I was wondering what role do you see for ILO, and how can we better improve that?
Thanks. Thanks, Selma. I think one very practical example how ILO is addressing that challenge is I don't know whether audience heard about child labor platform. So this is a kind of platform ILO set up so for multinational companies to be together and to share learning experiences and challenges on the issue of child labor in supply chains. So just for your information, there's a kind of side events in parallel, happening now on child labor platform. So hope some of you may look at the recording of that session talking specifically on child labor platform. But I think using this kind of platform, ILO facilitated like dialogue among private sector partners, and also trying to kind of develop a kind of joint work plan. So under the child labor platforms, there's a specific country working groups on Côte d'Ivoire, in Uganda, but also in Congo, as well as India. So in those countries, ILO has been facilitating a dialogue and then to develop a kind of joint, work plan to address the issue and create synergies among different interventions. And then definitely another important aspect, added value as ILO, can bring is really connecting with, the government structure. So like you saw the example of, that universal health coverage. So like ILO has a very important role to play to facilitate, a private sector to contribute effectively, to strengthen the public system. So this is kind of very important role ILO or, like UNICEF, UN agencies can play and promote a kind of facilitate PPP arrangement. So this is, I think I would say that's something we can definitely facilitate. So I really encourage, companies to also, be part of platform like child labor platform. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And may I ask you for just your final advice, or what would you like to do? What would you like to ask of companies and governments in this fight?
Yeah, I think it's really important whenever private sector develops kind of interventions. I'm sure most of companies are doing, but really looking at existing structure. For example, if there's any child labor monitoring kind of mechanism, I think rather than developing a kind of new monitoring system for a company, I think to see what extent, companies can use the existing structure. And that kind of dialogue, definitely ILO can facilitate. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. And then before we move to the Q&A, I also want to give Emmanuel the opportunity to plead his case for what companies or governments should do more or other differently. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Salma. So what's needed to scale the child labor-free zones? I would say that scaling child labor reduction requires moving from short-term pilots to long-term system-level commitments. When you look at child labor-free zones, by design, they should be a long-term approach because they aim to change social norms, strengthen community systems, and sustain zero tolerance to child labor over time. But there's the main bottleneck. The main bottleneck to scale is not proof of concept, but a sustained engagement, especially in our case, coming from the private sector. Companies like Chagalanyi Coffee Limited often engage through time-bound projects, 2 years, 3 years, while these child labor-free zones require multi-year commitment aligned with sourcing strategies. As long as you're there in the area, you're sourcing, you have a supply chain in that location, kindly continue with the activities. So, the Rainforest Alliance contributes to scale by embedding the child labor prevention and remediation strategies into our certification and due diligence requirements, creating commercial incentives for long-term engagement. Like you can't get a license or a certificate from the Rainforest Alliance to sell your coffee if you're doing nothing about child labor. So you must show proof of monitoring and remediation. So therefore, child labor-free zones can then serve as deep impact models within certified supply landscapes. To scale them, companies need to commit beyond pilots, and they would treat them as part of power sourcing and risk management strategies. While for the governments, I believe it's about aligning with the national policies, the national labor action plans, the education system, and social protection networks must all be focused to eliminating child labor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and actually we already see some governments do that, right? In the case of Ghana, child labor-free zones are also official policy there. So it's very nice to see things moving in that way as well. So I will now hand over to Maggie to start the Q&A. Thank you all for waiting with your questions. We are all available for the questions. Maggie, go ahead.
Hi. Yes, thank you all for these interesting contributions. Many questions have come in. Some of them I think have also been answered when you continued the panel discussion. But let's start with one from Charity Hodzi. She did not mention to who it was directed, but let us direct it to Delight. The question is, how did you deal with child-headed households and female-headed households only? My fear is that we are emphasizing on a family structure that has drastically broken down in Zimbabwe. Delight.
So if you can actually repeat the question again, I'm not sure if I understand the context of the question.
The question was basically what your focus was. You mentioned, for example, that you engage with spouses, but then Charity is asking, do you also engage other kinds of households? So maybe female-headed households, etc.
Yes, so it's strictly based on the program and also the program design. So I'll give two scenarios. For the VSLAs, naturally VSLAs are voluntary associations, and so it is not limited to gender or capacity. The people will have to agree that they will come together, and then they'll be able to abide by the VSL rules, whereby they meet every week, they contribute, and if there are discussions and social support activities, they build into it. However, some programs are more gender targeted. For example, the Income Accelerator program, which is being funded by Nestle, for them, it's a household program, which means that both the spouse and then the farmer is eligible to participate or must participate in the program. And it enjoins both of them to be able to make collective decision making. And that is why, as part of the IR program, the household must participate in the VSLA. And I already explained what the VSLA does to them. They are able to go through the girls and then the child methodology where we train them. And so gradually we are able to shape how the households are able to, the spouse and then the farmer are able to interact with each other and able to make decisions together to be able to help the households. For households who are not so a single-headed household or either a male-headed household or a female-headed household, for that, they are not excluded in the program. They are also allowed to participate. But again, they also participate in the program and then also participate in all the activities, including the VSLA. In this case, he is able to learn how to be able to manage his resources and then also how to extend support to his kids, how to help them to go to school and also to remediate them if they're in child labor. And so strictly, these are program-specific requirements. Some of them will have more targeted approach. Some of them are opened. Some of them have a household approach. So based on the programming, then you are able to find ways to be able to address the gender nuances in the program. Thank you. I'm not sure if I've explained thoroughly to it, but you can still send some comments, some questions in the comment section, and I can address that. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. And we will share the presentation. The last slide will have our contact details. And I also had the pleasure of visiting your En route program in Ivory Coast. And there you could also see that sometimes when the household is headed by a brother or a sister, you also engage with them. So it was very nice how you're very flexible and you consider that indeed a household does not always look like husband and wife. So thank you so much. Great. Yeah, I'll move on to another question from Angelica Kessler. I think I can best address this to Selma. She says, I see mainly social challenges, time management and task sharing. Did anybody look into technical solutions like time-saving innovations, mechanization?
We did look into that. It's just that there was very little evidence out there. So we mainly looked at mechanization as an add-on to labor groups. There is some evidence there. But in terms of primary production of cocoa, coffee, and cashew, to my knowledge, there's still very limited mechanization happening.
Yeah, and actually
so that's a huge knowledge gap.
Yeah, and we are working together on an FBK project that is looking at the mechanization of these labor gangs. So through the knowledge and learning agenda, we'll continue to share findings there. Thank you so much. Let me see. So I saw a few questions, and Emmanuel, you already touched upon had the need for continuous engagement from companies in child labor free zones, especially if they continue to source there. I was wondering, how do you see engagement with the government? And also, you mentioned that in the high intensity areas, there was that long-term effect. But how long was such a high intensity area? And which structures are these, the companies or the government that you're still engaging?
Okay, thank you. Both we are lucky that we continue to engage both the government and the private sector, because up to now we still work with Chagalani Coffee Limited, and also Chagalani is still in the West now, up to date, and they are Rainforest Alliance certified. Yes, we said that these child labor free zones should not be short-term projects, and it takes a while to put up the structures and ensure that they achieve that long-term effectiveness. It can take you at least 3 years. So look at systems that will remain in place for at least 4 to 10 years for you to get that real good impact. Why do we need all this time? You need the time to shift those deep-rooted social norms around child labor, around the girls' education. We also need to get enough time to strengthen the community monitoring and response systems, because this should be coming from them for it to be sustainable. I can tell you that up to today, all the systems that were created around from 2015 and we left, they are still in place. If you told me to go to the West Nile today with you to show them to you, I can easily say, yes, let's go, they are there, because we took some time with them. Also, when you look at the stabilization of the households' livelihoods, this comes from coffee and activities or good agronomic practices like stamping. You first move 2 steps backwards and then start moving back again in the front. Because when you stamp, you're telling the household that from those coffee trees, you're going to get nothing for at least 1 full year. Then after that year, in the second year, that's when they start to get little. But as time goes on, they get to reap big from these activities. Some can be faster, like the application of fertilizers, but some take real time. And you cannot apply fertilizers on very old coffee trees anyway. And then the institutionalization of the links to ensure that the government, the local government, is fully involved with the schools, and maybe there are social protection structures coming in from the government. Maybe you're looking at bylaws being set up at the local government level. It even gets worse when you get to the parliament, where it's at the national level. You have bills that will sit there for so long. So it needs some bit of time, the 3 to 10 years that I was talking about, that you have something of value, that's something that will be sustainable, that will last for ages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Okay, so we'll take one last question for Minoru, and then the closing I will hand over to my colleague Charlotte Bernhard from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. So Minoru, I saw a few inquiries about the wind tool and also its application in other countries. So I suggest that once we share the contact details in the presentation and the recording, people can get in touch with you. Then there was also a question from Evelyn Cabanya, thanking you for the engagement. She's mentioning in Kenjojo district in Uganda, we have many cases of child labor in coffee and tea industry. However, as a local government, we have limited resources to do intensive mobilization. How can ILO Excel project assist in eradicating this issue of child labor?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Maggie. So the first point on wind, yes, definitely, I'm very happy to, have a kind of individual discussion with those whoever interested in this wind tool. So wind tool is really kind of global tool, and we are but customizing this tool to different countries and different supply chain context. So yeah, I'm happy to really have this discussion. But again, this is really a tool that can promote a kind of developing kind of self solution by farmers or workers by themselves. I think this is a quite interesting and sustainable approach. And we work also with government officials like agriculture extension officers, as well as, like occupational safety and health officers of the Ministry of Labor. So happy to really work with you and then bringing also, resources from the government so that we can work together. So, and then the next point on Uganda, yes, I think this is a really challenge of how we can scale up what's going on at the community level, at district level. This is exactly why I think working with the government system is critical. Of course, mainstreaming, different interventions implemented by, like CSOs, private sector, or like even ILO, really as, we work together with the local governments and the national governments, we can have a really opportunity to scale and replicate the model. And maybe I would also add that, in addition to the public resource mobilization from the government itself, but also from the development partners, I think the working with the private sector is really key. So how we can really bring additional resources, to respond to this kind of social issue like child labor, working together with the private sector, I think this is really key for scaling up. And, ILO is very happy to be engaged in this reflection. So thank you so much, Maggie.
Thank you all panel members and Selma for this interesting discussion. There are many more questions. We have noted them, and of course you will get the contact details. So we're very happy to continue the discussion. And now I would like to hand the floor to Senior Policy Advisor Charlotte Bernhard from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands in Morocco already, warmed up for the conference, I can imagine. To you, the closing words. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Maggie, and thank you also to the panelists for their interesting interventions today. I think it was very thoughtful contributions, and it's good to hear their openness and their practical insights in what they shared to us today. So thank you for that. Yeah, and maybe to mention also a little bit about the work that we do as a government and how we support this. The Netherlands has a long-standing commitment to the fight against child labor, particularly in global value chains. And for many years, the Dutch government has worked with partners across sectors to address child labor and to promote responsible business conduct. And this commitment remains strong also in the coming years, looking at, for example, the developments of legislative developments on responsible business conduct and due diligence. And this legislation creates an extra boost for companies to work on sustainability issues, for example, the elimination of child labor, but also living wage, living income, deforestation, decent work, all kind of topics. Yeah, but at the same time, we also recognize that if we really truly want to tackle child labor in a structural and sustainable way, a broader approach is needed. And I think everybody has shared that today already. I mean, the KIT research shows that, but also our speakers, the panelists, mentioned that. Child labor is not an isolated problem. Poverty remains one of the most important root causes, but addressing poverty is therefore very important to have a lasting solution. But it's not an easy solution to find. It's not, as Selma mentioned, increasing income and working towards a living income does not automatically lead to the elimination of child labor. And income is a crucial factor, but it's not the whole story. And simply paying a higher price for products, although that's often very necessary, it's not sufficient on its own. So to achieve a living income that contributes to reducing child labor, we need to look at this wider set of factors, like including income stability, income diversification, improvements in productivity and quality, paying attention to gender dynamics within households and value chains, to really make sure that a higher income also influences the outcomes for children, better outcomes for children. Well, I think all the elements that have been shared by Selma are important, and it's very good to see that there are so many projects and programs that are taking care and taking these elements along to contribute to systemic change. And that's also what we as the Netherlands try to do through the programs and projects that we support to promote sustainable value chains and to reduce child labor. And yeah, we aim to strengthen this broader integrated approach, for example, through our support to the SPVO, as Maggie already explained, and also to the ILO Excel program, as Minoru has already explained. But at the same time, we also work closely with a range of other partners. For example, IDAs, Solidaridad. We also support our trade unions and many others. And each of these actors bring valuable expertise and perspectives to the table. Yeah, and that's what we see emerging from these collaborations are concrete good practices and examples and approaches that show promise and that can be shared more widely to inspire others. And that's why I think this session today here was very valuable. We can learn from each other. We can also learn more from others. I hope that this conference will also inspire us more. But we should also look, and I think it was also mentioned in the questions that were asked, that we should also look for how to scale up these approaches. And I hope that looking at a diverse public here today at this webinar, but also hoping that there's a diverse audience at the conference. I've not met people yet here in Marrakesh, but I hope to meet a lot of people in the coming days, because I think that this multi-stakeholder approach is essential. Addressing the broader structural drivers of child labor requires the involvement of governments, businesses, workers' organizations, civil society, and international organizations, as no single actor can solve this challenge alone. So yeah, let's work together, complement each other's efforts, and being willing to learn and adapt are crucial if we are to make real progress towards the elimination of child labor and towards payment of living incomes and living wages and towards more sustainable and reliable value chains. So I hope that this session has inspired you as it did me, and that the conference as a whole will continue to do so. And I hope that you all have the opportunity to watch more online sessions or to attend in person some sessions at the conference. And that by sparking new ideas, strengthening networks and encouraging collaboration on these broader sustainability challenges will help to eliminate child labor. And I did see already getting some people wanted to get in touch with each other in the Q&A. So I hope that's the start of more working together and also hoping for more long-term commitments. So finally, let us not forget that this is not only about doing what is right for children, although that alone should be reason enough, but it also makes sense from a business perspective. In an increasingly uncertain world with more trade uncertainty, the importance of strong relationships with suppliers and of responsible purchasing practices is growing. These are key to resilience and ultimately to securing supply in the future. So thank you very much. I wish you an inspiring continuation of the conference.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Wishing you a really fruitful stay there in Morocco. And thank you all for the participants all over the world who have joined this afternoon. We will share the recording and the presentation together with our contact details with you soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, dear panel members.